I mean, Sweden in the Cold War, and this is one of your fortes, was of course one of the non-conformist European states. Not only was it not a NATO member, but it also had a social democratic leader, a famous one and a very popular one, Mr. Olof Palme, who didn't go along with the United States. And at some point, there was even you even had interruptions of diplomatic relations with the United States, if I remember correctly. But Olof Palme, in many respects, also when it comes to Palestine, had a very independent foreign policy. Um, can you tell us a little bit about that history of Sweden, how it ended, and how it transformed into this very obedient, being part of the club policy of today?
Yes, I think I'm not old enough to remember the early years there for Olof Palme, but it's probably been quite a journey for at least my my parents' generations, the generation that was born during the 1940s, uh, to have seen this. Sweden was, as you say, um, an independent voice, a third party voice. I think it was involved with the Bandung movement during the neutrality years, so to speak. Then, of course, as I said, we were connected to the NATO sphere. We had the cooperations that were unofficial all through this Cold War. But Olof Palme, he started out as a very huge fan and friend of the United States. This has to be reminded. He studied in America. He gained a law degree. He was a very smart man, and he quickly gained a law degree in America. However, Olof Palme was one of these few politicians who was able to keep two conflicting thoughts in his head at once. So this is what led to the confrontation with America during the Christmas bombings of Hanoi in 1972, 73. I can't remember the exact year, but somewhere thereabouts, where Olof Palme realized that his America wasn't really the America that he knew and that he respected. So that's when he together with the North Vietnamese ambassador to Sweden went was seen with him walking in a torchlit procession against the terror bombings of Hanoi during the Christmas that Christmas. And this, of course, infuriated America for a number of reasons. One, of course, a Western-ish leader was officially protesting America. Two, they had seen Olof Palme as an ally and as a friend. Now, the reasonable reaction to this would have been looking inwards and saying, "Ooh, if one of our supporters is this mad at us, perhaps we should maybe change our policy on terror bombing Hanoi." Obviously, this is America. They never apologize. It's USA, fuck yay. So they withdrew their ambassador and it caused a diplomatic stir. But Olof Palme, he persisted in this, which he rightly did. Now that this is compared to now, the politicians should have been able to do the same with Israel and say, Israel, we respect you. You have this democratic-ish way of dealing with your country and running your country, but right now you are way out of line. No leader in Europe is, of course, there's a variety. I mean, some Spanish and Irish leaders have come out quite forcefully against Israel, but basically, there has been no Olof Palme walking alongside the Palestinian protesters in Europe, which they should be able to do. So I think this was Olof Palme's strength. He was able to accept America and, be a supporter of America, which I think a lot of Western people are because they have loved the American soft power. But he was able to, in time, criticize America for what they were doing. And he went on to do this. And in the 1980s, because he lost power, he was voted out of office for a period of 6 years. between 76 to 81, I think. And then he returned to power. And when he returned to power, he once again started to enter into de-escalatory talks with the Soviet Union. And this was a time when tensions were heating up. This was during the early 80s, around between 82, 83, 84, when you had all those more or less dying fellows entering the Soviet leadership, Andropov and these very old, feeble men. And then you had that nuclear scare. I can't for the life of me remember the incident, but when the Soviet Union actually believed that they were being attacked, perhaps you remember the.
I I don't remember that one, but I do remember talking to Ola Tunander, and in 81,
Ah,
I think it was when the submarine scare started in Sweden, right? Whiskey on the
yes, yes,
rocks.
yes, exactly.
When but maybe I'll let you explain it.
No, no, Whiskey on the Rocks was officially it was a Soviet submarine that uh, entered the South Sweden archipelago in Blekinge. Uh, it was believed they were going to pick up Soviet divers who had been there. Uh, but it was quite obvious that a submarine of this size didn't by mistake enter, or they would never go on a mission this deep within Swedish territory. So first it was a navigational error, but Professor Tunander has, in a very, very good way, together with a few other researchers, pointed to the fact that one of the military Soviet officers was probably in on running this Soviet submarine aground.
Mhm.
In order
The
to
important
in
thing,
order
it
to
ran
create.
aground, it got
Yeah,
stuck, and it was seen and it was photographed. And
yeah,
that's when Sweden again like was shell shocked in 80 back in the 80s of like, oh my
yeah,
God, the submarines. And from there on, stories about submarines kept creeping up because there were sightings, right? Again and again. And the Soviets said, like, it's not us. And the Swedes said, so of course it's you, up to the point where the Soviets said, good, shoot them down, take
yeah,
them out, please.
yeah.
And Sweden never did. And
No, Sweden never did, and it's been by Professor Trunander as well. It's been quite heavily researched, and I would say it's beyond reasonable doubt that these submarines were, in fact, German or British. NATO had a deal with Sweden that they could go in on practice runs within the Swedish archipelago. And there, Ola Thunander is better at this, but there are stories where the then Admiral Bror Stephenson, actually, stopped uh, using submergible bombs because he was one of the few people that know that this wasn't a Soviet sub. So during an incident in Hårsfjärden, where the Swedes let loose, they actually were ordered to not do it, and this submarine was able to leave, and it was probably a wounded German submarine or British. I think maybe in 70 years' time we will know what kind of submarine it was, but it wasn't a Soviet one. So the Swedes were scared. The Swedes were once again ramping up its defense industry. But Olof Palme was still going to go on a visit to the Soviet Union to try and create a sea of peace around the Baltics. Because then Finland and Sweden were neutral, so both these countries, together with the Soviet Union and Germany and Denmark, could be able to create a sea of peace. Now, as soon as the word peace pops up anywhere in the West, I'm sure there are alarm bells going off somewhere in a subterranean bunker under the Pentagon. And just a few weeks before Olof Palme was going to go to the Soviet Union, he was killed. He was assassinated, and this working for a dialogue with the Soviets. I mean, he wanted to have a new security architecture that was called a a common security and that recognized security concerns on all sides. And you have to assess the fact that the Swedish chief of counterintelligence at the time, one Olof Fronstedt, described Palme as a Soviet agent of influence. And I think that the then CIA chief in America, James Angleton, also referred to Palme as someone who was a danger to this.
Now,
So the fact is that it's more than likely, because no one has ever been charged. Well, someone has been charged with the murder of Olof Palme, but if you look at the evidence from a lawyer's perspective, which I have done, it just doesn't pan out. The whole story behind the assassination of Olof Palme, it doesn't fit.